Ascott's also going to take Edward back into the past so he can learn for himself a lot about different historic times, and in particular, they wanted him to have his own first-hand knowledge about religions, about Jesus Christ in different historic periods, so it would be his own knowledge. You know, when you hear information from someone else, that's just information. It's not your truth. But if you actually experience it yourself, then you have first-hand knowledge. It becomes part of your life, and it's your truth. So in this instance, they were always careful to take Billy and let him learn for himself, see for himself, so it became his particular knowledge. Well, they've been in the ship talking for a long time, and nightfall comes, and they decide to go for a walk. They're actually walking hand in hand. Billy's 19 at this time, and obviously very taken with this woman. You can understand why. And they're walking. There's a dim moon out dim light out that night. It's very pretty out. They go for a walk, and they're just chatting and talking. And suddenly, Ascott pulls Edward's hand and kind of stops him. And this fellow jumps up at them with a gun. And he's an elderly fellow, probably in his late 50s or 60s, something like that. And he's pointing a gun at them. Well, they immediately calm him down. Apparently they've stumbled onto someone's campfire here, and they calm the fellow down, and he finds out that they're not bad guys, and they didn't come to jump him in the middle of the night or anything. His name turns out to be Jitchi, and that he is from Russia, and he used to be a Russian diplomat or ambassador of some type, and he had taken to the road. This fellow Jitchi was now traveling for the road the past several years, and he was kind of out, developing his own experiences. So they talked to him for a while by his campfire. Jitchi offered them a little bit of food and so forth, and they got to be very friendly. Well, Ascott turns to Edward and takes him by the hand, says it's time to leave now, and they prepare to go. And Jitchi stops them and remarks how comfortable he is around them, that he doesn't get to see people very often, and hopes they would stay. Ascott tells Jitchi, well, we can't stay now, but we'll be back on February 7th, and we'll see you again at this same location. So he's happy with that, and they take off. So they go back to the ship. They return to the ship, and it's getting very late at night, and they stay again in the ship that night. So Edward stays there with Ascott again. And in the morning they get up, and Ascott has a little breakfast for them, and they have some kind of unusual juice he didn't recognize and so forth, and they have a little breakfast thing there. And she explains a little bit more about creation to Edward, excuse me. He's still Edward at this point. She says that she's drawing his attention to the fact, and she knows that Edward is not particularly mathematical and scientific, but she explains to him that all of creation can be explained mathematically. That it is a totally logical evolution, that the creation itself is totally logical in every way. We just don't realize it because we have not discovered it yet. We have not scientifically advanced to that point. But she explains to him that there are the numbers 3, 7, and 12 are the important numbers. Now, I don't know too much about this either, but she says the entire mathematics of the universe consists somehow of an enclosed circle, which can somehow be conceived with the numbers 3, 7, 12, and 7 times 7. So for those of you who are into numerology, perhaps you already know these things. It can probably better explain it than I could. It doesn't mean too much to me. She's being very careful with Edward all the time not to take any particular information too far, only to open him up to certain ideas and concepts a little bit at a time. And she acknowledges this again and says that she and ETs, they have to be very careful, when they give information out so as not to overload us or, give us things that really aren't useful at the time. Another major concern of Ascott's always was that if they gave Billy too much information, especially in the scientific areas, that it may find its way out into the scientific community, and they really didn't want this to happen. They see us as a planet anyway that's, technically way out of line with our social development, where, the majority of the planet's trying to eat and even have some health and find a home or some shelter, and then we have a small percentage of the planet, which is very highly developed. So there's a broad difference between our scientific development and our social development. They have already watched us develop the atomic bomb and blow up Japan, and so we're very concerned about feeding any more information to our scientists, which could do even more damage than that. She's telling Billy a little bit about his future, and that later on that he will be directed to confront the Befath group, that they have a strong representation in Berlin through this Thule Society, Thule, that's been going on for hundreds of years, and it would be good for Billy to confront them at a certain point. When that happens, she warns him that his life will come in danger, that the life that he's about to lead, his mission in life as this prophet, bringing truth and so forth to the world, does bring a lot of danger along with it. After he confronts these Befath people, she says his life will be in danger, and it's about that time period anyway that it'll be necessary, for Billy to disappear for about a decade. His contacts are going to stop at that point anyway, because he'll be left alone for about 10 years or so, to 11 years, in order before the contacts start again, because these will be difficult, unusual times for Edward, that he will become married, and he's going to develop his family and settle down, and he's going to have to learn. All this information that's being presented to him needs to become part of his life also. He needs to learn it and make it part of himself, have cognition of it, as they say, so it becomes part of him. In other words, what they're doing is they're educating young Edward, and now they're allowing him to spiritually grow through the use of this information to facilitate his role, his mission later in life, and that his contacts would start again in the first part of the year 1975. Well, Ascot tells Edward it's time to leave now. They're still in Jordan. So she leaves, and Edward gets into the small ship that he came in, which is still parked there, and he returns back to home where he started out. 2 days go by, and of course Edward's pretty excited, because she's already told him they're getting ready to take some other time travels and back into religious historic times, back to the year 32, around the time of the crucifixion. So he's pretty excited about this. 2 days go by, and Billy once again returns to the same spot where he was picked up before. But this time Ascot comes in the ship instead of just an unmanned ship coming for him. And they return back to the same spot they were at in Jordan. And she explains that this time they're going to travel back into the past, like she told him, to increase Edward's education. And she begins to explain to him while they're while they're on their way to Jordan, a little bit more about his future. She says they don't normally tell Earth people about their future too much because they can't bear it. It's not good for people, for instance, to know about their lifespan, about who they're going to marry and so forth, because one of the problems is if they tell people, they'll probably mess it up. You may not agree with the way your future's going, or the one that you have planned out for yourself at the time, and you'll be able to try to make changes in that, which can have cause and effect on other situations. So normally, she says, most people can't understand and bear their future, and so they don't tell them. But they were telling Billy because in his life as a prophet, he's going to need to learn more and more about self-control, that he's going to have many hard times, many difficult times, and he's going to have to let them happen and go the way that they're going to go. He has to understand his future and actually live it the way that it's going to happen. At this point, Edward still has both arms, and she explains to him that he's going to lose his arm, even though she knows exactly when and where. She doesn't tell him exactly, because she doesn't want him to know the exact time. She just says it'll be between the 1st and the 5th of August in 1965, which it did turn out to be. She says at that time, right around that time period, that he will change his name and start going by the name of Billy. She says you'll be known all over the world by this name, and unfortunately it's going to cause you lots of personal misery, which in a way it kind of has, because Billy now is fairly well known around the world, and it has caused him a lot of problems. He's had several attempts on his life. His family's been harassed quite a bit. His life really hasn't been his own, and only the last few years has he really tried to force his own privacy to kind of get his world back together. She tells him that he'll marry a 17-year-old girl in Greece, and that he'll have 3 children with the names Atlantis, Gilgamesha, and Methuselah, using the old names. And that he will have 10 years of very hard life before his next contacts are going to start, which will be in 1975. When these contacts in 75 start, which will be with the Pleiadians, she says around that time period he will be invited to come to Germany to address a UFO Congress there in Berlin. And once they find out, though, the types of things that he was going to say, the kind of truths that he's going to talk about, they'll cancel his engagement. They won't want him to speak because Billy's going to speak some very hard, harsh truths about life and religion, and this UFO group there is based all around religion. This is a UFO group who believes they've been contacted by ETs who are somehow sent on behalf of God. And they are, believing this, and they are, don't want Billy involved now suddenly in their operation because he's going to come and tell them the truth about creation, and they just don't want to hear that. She said it's also important that no one uses the name that Billy had been traveling by in Persia, which was Phantom. Apparently, even though his name was Edward, on his travels around and so forth, he was using the name Phantom for some reason. Now, I don't know where that came from. But she told me from that time on, from 1975 on, he should never use that name again. He should only use Edward and Billy, which will be his new name at that time. At that particular time of the contact, she said that there was 2.7 million people on Earth who had seen a UFO. There were 3,104 Earth people who had actually had contact with extraterrestrials. Most of these contacts were telepathic. Some of them were actually physical contacts. There seem to be, around 3,000 ships a year come into our atmosphere. A very small percentage of those really have very much interest in us. They just kind of look over the planet or stop and get something, pick up whatever they might want. But a few of them actually will have some physical contacts from time to time with Earth beings. These will generally only be one time or two times because they're just passing by. They very seldom ever lead into anything, on running. So there aren't really that many people out there that have, actually had contacts with the ETs. She said also, beginning in 1964, that he would start writing down all of his contacts. And again, we're still in 1956 here. She told him beginning in 64, he'd start writing them down. And it would be with the help of the technology from extraterrestrials, that he would continue to have meetings, contacts, teachings, and so forth, just like was going on here. It wouldn't be necessary for him to take notes and write them down, that the extraterrestrials, and in particular Ascot, had the ability to store all of the thoughts and words and feelings in their own subconscious. And they had devices on board the ship which could recall these words, thoughts, and feelings from their subconscious at any time, and they could forward them on telepathically to Billy so he could actually write down all the notes from his conversations. And this is what did happen over the years. When Billy's contacts with the Pleiadians started, that's exactly what they did. He would be on board a ship. All the thoughts, feelings, and words and so forth were recorded into the subconscious of Semjase. And later on, their devices would actually pull these thoughts back out of the subconscious and telepathically send them to Billy so he could type and write down all of his contact notes. Well, they settle down and go back to sleep again in the ship, which they do. They spend the night again in Ascot's ship there in Jordan. And they're woke up in the morning by a gunshot, which they're kind of surprised. And Billy looks outside, and there's Jitsi standing out there with a rifle. Well, this is kind of a surprise. They come out of the ship, and here's Jitsi, and he, of course, is greatly surprised to find this big silver beamship, or I guess you should just call it a flying saucer here, because it's not a beamship type drive. Ascot's ship were different. So they have to go through this process of explaining things to Jitsi. Jitsi, of course, gets very excited, and suddenly he says, "Oh, God, you guys must be from Venus or Mars or something." And Ascot's saying, "Surely we're not. We're not from there at all. There's no life forms on Venus or Mars." And Jitsi's pretty excited, as you might well understand. And he thinks Edward and Ascot are probably both ETs. And Edward's informing him, no, that he's an earthworm just like him. And he's from Earth, and that the lady Ascot, is an extraterrestrial. Well, Jitsi thinks she's an angel right away and says, "Oh, surely you must be here on behalf of God." And he pulls his Bible out right away and is saying, "Oh, look, I believe in God, I believe in Jesus, and I study the Bible all the time." And Ascot's a little taken back by this and begins to explain that no, that she or no extraterrestrials come on behalf of God, that any extraterrestrials that claim that are just being deceptive and very wicked, and they shouldn't do that. So they go through this process of explaining all about who they are and what they're doing, that they're getting ready to take a trip. Well, this kind of throws Ascot off. She wasn't expecting this at all, for Jitsi to turn up right here and doesn't know exactly what to do about it. So the opportunities extended to Jitsi to come along with them. If they're going to be making some travels